This video is on envisioning a shared future and how to use strategic planning in that regard and to assist you in your leadership. We'll look at fascinating aspects of strategic planning from your worldview to financing, developing data, and presenting your ideas to others, which ultimately lead to cooperation. My name is Dr. Will Weston, and I'm the president of Warren County Community College, and I'll be your guide. One of the best things to remember is that strategic planning should be systemic. It should be integrated. You should be making decisions based on data that will allow you to formulate a direction for your organization. It'll allow you to provide guidance to those who work for you. It'll let you implement tactical plans or plans at departments or task forces, any kind of planning that comes out. When used correctly, it'll improve existing processes and help you develop a common language and a shared culture in your organization. Some of the biggest setbacks to either plans or leadership are cultural mismatches in an organization. One of the key factors or components of strategic planning is vision. With a leader out front, preparing for the individuals who work for him or her and those who follow their leader, a direction that sets a pace for excellence in your organization. Or what is it you hope to achieve? What is that thing that you want to succeed most at? Where do you want to take your organization? This is what you need to ask. You should also remember that vision will constantly never be achieved. Your vision will exceed people's expectation as the leader. It will go beyond what is possible. And that's exactly where you want. You want people who follow you to be striving for better, for improvement, and make it continuous. And if you can reach your vision, then you've set the bar too low. Really, another thing you have to consider is, what is the mission? What is the purpose of the task that you faced? What forces can this organization contribute? And which medium do we operate? It's a day-to-day job. What are we trying to accomplish? And again, a task force might have a minor mission fitting into the larger mission of the organization that is achievable. But the overall mission of the organization may never truly be achievable in a document type result or an outcome. It may be something you're striving to do. So for an educational institution, it might be create smarter individuals who come to our organization. Well, that could be a vision, that could be a mission. And I think one of the big problems we have when we talk about strategic planning and leadership, and you may have experienced this, I know I have, I've sat in a room for hours with people arguing over these definitions. Now, that isn't really what a mission is. That isn't really what a goal is. This is what it really is. Those semantical arguments, they don't add value to the organization. They don't improve culture. That's how one person tries to say, I'm smarter than another. That does not get you anywhere. It does not improve outcomes. It does not create return on investment. It does not create a situation where the organization is going to improve. What it does is allow individual voices in the room to try to prove they're smarter than the person next to them. And that always builds collaboration and cooperation, right? It doesn't. Shut that down immediately and say, you may have had your own definition before, but this is the common definition we're going to use now. When you're trying to come up with your vision and mission, one of the things you have to think about is foresight. What is it we're trying to accomplish? What is it that we're going to do tomorrow? So that looking forward, ensuring that it's appropriate for the future is important. The leader has to do this in any kind of plan development or in any kind of leadership capacity. Another thing that I have seen go wrong so many times is this lack of hindsight, this lack of looking back and valuing the existing traditions and cultures and actually overly violating it. Like the leader walks in, and it may in fact be the person's first major leadership position, and they start to dismantle everything that's been done before instead of valuing it and building upon it. Look, if I'm a new leader and I don't really like the way the culture is, it really doesn't build a new culture by criticizing the old one to the point that those people who embodied it and implemented it and were empowered by it feel as if they have failed. So there's always something good you can find in an existing culture or tradition. Maybe it isn't a lot, but focus when talking about the organization on those positives. And then remember, it's important for you as a leader to have a worldview and capitalize on the impact of new developments and trends and see the whole picture in detail. Too many times, especially as people move up, and it's often known as the Peter Principle, where someone is promoted to their level of incompetence, or the idea that I got one too many promotion and I couldn't move forward. That's why it's important to constantly be developing your worldview, to realize when you stepped into this new position, it had new duties, it had new challenges, it had new opportunities. But did you prepare yourself and did you develop a worldview that would allow you to really, really concentrate on those and use those for the betterment of your organization? I think another thing I like to talk about is this idea of an experienced economy or an emergent complex economy beyond what we ever knew. And there's some factors within this, and one of them is this idea of a world-based political structure. We used to be nation-based, and we see in around the world there's still remnants of this. They often don't lead anywhere positive or productive. So we have to move into this realization that we are in global economy, we are in global hegemonic superstructure, we are in a global-based world where our personal beliefs may not encompass every belief in our organization and every understanding. And we need, as the leader, to understand all perspectives and points of view. Which brings us to our next one, this notion of egalitarian stratification, or this notion as we build organizations, what is the level of equality within them? Many people will feel that command and control is their best mechanism. And in some circumstances, that may in fact be the case. But I think as we go through this lecture, what you'll realize is even when we put command and control structures in place, people will emerge. They will develop their own egalitarian viewpoints and processes. Even in the Soviet Union, which was highly dictatorial, there were elements of this idea of egalitarian stratification. There were elements of revolt, often sabotage, and this is how this can be manifested. We'll talk a little bit about this later. We have to realize we're living in a time of chaotic, hyper-diffusive technology. Well, what's that mean? Well, at one point, we may have talked about this as the internet. And for those of us who are older, we may remember that as a green screen. Then there was the World Wide Web. Then there was the .com revolution. I think what we're seeing now is a revolution in robotics like never before. You may view this more simply as the young person in your neighborhood who got a drone for Christmas that's now buzzing around your house. And so now you have to worry about privacy. So we have this hyper-diffusive technology, and we have to understand how it affects our organizations. We have a notion of an expansive education. And as you know, I run a community college, but is that the only way to educate people? Is it just degrees? Do degrees mean as much as they used to, maybe, to employers as they once did? Now we see things popped up on social media like LinkedIn called badges. And that tells us something about a person's knowledge base. We see the no college kind of revolution among young people in the country that are saying, I can learn better by myself, or I can learn better by travel. I don't need the sage on the stage telling me things. Rather than fight this as educationalists, we should embrace it. How do we bring that expansive education into our own organization? How do we operationalize it to a new kind of credential for people that might be degree-based with badges, with certifications? So when an employer is faced between two people and one has a degree and the other has a degree and a long list of certifications that demonstrate that their education accomplishments, almost like they have an actual return on investment besides the degree that they graduate. I think this is where we're going. We have to also what I call retribalize family structures. The idea that we have a family has emerged, and many people have to move. So they're not around the family they were born into, or their hereditary family, or their nuclear family, if that even ever existed. What they do is retribe into new family structures. They may be deep, long-lasting friendships. They may be relationships which we don't define the same way as we did maybe even 10 years ago. And we have to be ready for this in our organizations. We have to be ready to deal with the human resource aspects of this, the marketing aspects of this. And we have to think about it, and we have to watch it. We have to realize also that the idea of human finitude has come into existence more than ever. We see this in people trying to defy age, or even trying to come up with means of perhaps defying their ultimate demise. And we've seen this ebb and flow in terms of the ultra-tolerant religiosity. We don't really want to live in a world where my religion, if it's opposite of yours or different from yours, that you're not willing to tolerate my belief system and value system. So we have to find a way when we're dealing with our cultures to understand that people are coming with different value systems. And how do we make those fit and make them assets rather than the means of what we used to always say? There's nothing like a dinner party until someone has to bring up politics or religion. Yet in our organizations, they exist. They exist below the surface. And for us to go in and go, well, that doesn't belong here because it's a public institution. Now, we can say that, but will our people react to that? We have to look at that, think about it. Then I'm going to say experiential markets. And probably a great example of this is your trip to Disney World. How is it that they've made standing in line almost entertaining in some respect? How is it that you're willing? The last time I was there, and at this age, I just kind of walk around and I look at what they've built. Well, younger members of my family enjoy the Disney World experience. And I walked by a ride, and it was an 8-hour-long line. And there were people who were standing at the 8-hour mark. Where else in the world would this happen, that people would be willing to do this? So the experience in and of itself matters. So it's beyond just the return on investment. It's what do you do for me? And as we see more and more younger people coming into our organizations, these may manifest themselves in terms of the greater good. What are we doing for the economy? What are we doing to help those less fortunate? What are we doing to help the planet? All these may matter in your getting the best employees or keeping them. And then lastly, and we'll talk about this a great deal, the notion that my teacher, Kyriakis Kantatos, taught of this notion of heterarchy as a structure, as a social structure. And do we really run hierarchical businesses, or do we run heterarchies that we try to manage and control through a functional hierarchy? We'll talk more about this. Stephen Covey kind of talked about it like this. He talked about the importance in running an organization is balancing life's whole. So in other words, at the personal level, if I want to be the leader and I want to move forward with plans in my organization, then I have to be trustworthy. People have to be able to trust me. If I live a life that is not trustworthy, if I'm deceitful, if I try to cover things up, if I try to not share all information for my own power, I'm not a trustworthy person. No one will follow me in the long term. And the long term may differ by organization. You may be sitting here listening to this and saying, wait, my organization has the same bad leader for the last 20 years. Well, sometimes it takes a while for this to become apparent. And that will depend on each individual organization. At the interpersonal level, if I'm trustworthy, I want to work with other people who are trustworthy. I want to work with people who understand what I'm trying to accomplish and will trust me with small and large tasks. And I also know that if I, as the leader, give an assignment or make a request or ask for advice, that I can trust what's coming to me. This is vital to the organization. So when I'm managing people, once I have this trustworthiness from myself, trust with others, then I need to give them small tasks, see how they do, and if they succeed, give them larger tasks. And this notion is empowerment. How do we move forward and empower the most people? There's nothing more frustrating to a leader than 400 emails, all asking for minuscule, minor things. Those people aren't trusted. They don't feel trusted. They're not empowered. They're not making decisions and moving the organization forward. They are asking for permission before they do anything. And that two kind of employees can fall there: the genuine and the person who's asking for permission, hoping that maybe you'll get to them in a week or two. Thus, they don't have to move forward with their project. That's not a good return on investment. And finally, the leader's ultimate goal is the organization, and it's to align all these things, to align trustworthy people who trust one another and empower them to get things done. This alignment of the organization is vital to success. And it doesn't matter how good your strategic plan is. If the organization is not aligned, it will not succeed. Gandhi kind of summed this up a long time ago. A person cannot do right in one department of life while attempting to do wrong in another department. Life is one indivisible whole. I can't be trustworthy in 3 aspects of my life and not trustworthy in 2 others and expect to be a good person, expect to be able to move things forward. Your organization is very similar to this. It behaves in much the same way. And if the organization has one department doing right and another department doing wrong, that department that isn't moving the organization has to be addressed. You have to balance the whole. And that's really what the alignment is about. So many times I come in and people are like, we've had too much change, or I don't like change. Change is constant and it's necessary. Can you imagine if you had lived in a world that never changed? If you had spent the entire time and the world had never revolved and time had never moved on, you wouldn't have any advancement. Life would never get better. Just the other day, someone was explaining to me that we all got smarter as human beings and we lived longer and had more energy when we learned to cook our food. When we were eating raw meats, and for those of you who are vegetarian, I understand you'll say, no, raw vegetables are good, and I would agree. But the meat, that advanced civilization when people learned to cook it. They were able to kind of move themselves forward because they were able to get more energy out of the protein. And people's bodies got larger, people got stronger, and more was possible. But that took change. And think about it at your organization. It may not be anything that large or that significant in the history of mankind. But how many times has the refusal to change meant that your organization did not move forward? So I said, I warned in advance, and we won't spend a lot of time. I'll simplify this in a second. But there is a logic to when we come together as people. There's a meta-theoretical logic where we think about level structures populated by differing structural entities. All right. Or in the world of maybe a higher education organization, you might think of it as a shared governance. And then when you get into this, there's first order, which is concrete, versus second order, which is constructed or questioning. So are facts really there? Or how many of them have been socially constructed? What is it we believe is truth that is capital T truth? And what is the second order? What are those small truths that build into it? We've seen in the 90s, the physical and biological science began to shift paradigms and develop new epistemic strategies. Epistemology being the study of knowledge, and an epistemic strategy being a strategy about creating new knowledge. Part of planning and leadership is always about creating new knowledge. Now, that knowledge may exist in the universe, but maybe our people don't understand it. Maybe we as leaders see the world anew, and we didn't know something tomorrow that we thought we knew today. But when we got to the next day, we realized that was ignorant. Okay? That was something I didn't understand. And this happens all the time. We can see this in recommendations for diet. We can see it in recommendations for alcohol consumption. We can see it in recommendations around smoking that happened at one point. There was once a time on TV where doctors would talk about the benefits of smoking. That seems illogical at this point. But we're constantly shifting paradigms and moving forward. We need to realize that our world and our organizations are constantly emerging. And this will bring us to the notion of heterarchy ultimately. Why, in a complex, emergently complex situation of organizational development, do we constantly try to shove that square peg into the round hole known as hierarchy? Let me give you an example that maybe will make a little bit more sense. In most workplaces, there's some kind of banter. Hopefully these days it's a little better than maybe it was 20 years ago. And that usually takes one person, which I'll call actor one, and another person, actor two, having a conversation. They may be friends. They may have worked together for many, many years. There may be a trust level there that is immense. 10 minutes into this conversation, actor three, the third person arrives, and they enter the conversation. If that person is new, relatively new to actor one and two, they may not talk about or trust that person at the same level. There may be some degrees of trust, but it's definitely going to change that conversation. Think about it. Think about if you were in a deep conversation with someone you truly trusted and had been with in a while, and a third person walked in. Won't the conversation change? So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the emergent complexity. Then let's say after 20 minutes, the supervisor comes in. The employees may start thinking, well, the supervisor, maybe he doesn't value what we're talking about. Maybe they think we're talking about things at the workplace that really aren't work related. Does their behavior change? And I think this happens constantly in many forms, not just maybe a social conversation, but it will happen about an organizational conversation, a work conversation, a structural conversation. And it may happen and it may affect action. Sometimes, if we're trying to empower, perhaps the best thing for the supervisor to do is stay away. So there are many epistemic strategies in understanding organizations. I'll try to lay some of them out. I'll try to give you some of the theory. I'll try to lay out some of the theorists for you that have emerged in years. Stephen Covey's a relatively famous kind of organizational and personal development kind of guru. But his epistemic strategy and what he talks about is reductionism. It's always reduction. The 7 characteristics of highly successful people, highly organized people. Whenever you see these numbers, you can almost always kind of say, is this a reductionist theory? If I do these 7 things, will I be successful? In other words, the end result or the whole equals the sum of its parts. Just do these 7 habits of highly effective people or 7 habits of highly effective organizations, and things will get better. The parts will matter to the whole. Then there's an epistemic strategy known as construction or constructionism. This is really logical determinism or cause and effect. If this happens, then that happens. If 3 people get together and agree upon something, it becomes real in its consequences. It becomes real in its reality. It becomes real in its roots. We're able to construct from the ground up. Barker wrote about this in his famous book on paradigms. Stephen Kuhn wrote very famously about it when he was talking about the structures of scientific revolutions. We construct knowledge from a ground base up. Kuhn would even say, even if we knew our knowledge was wrong and we had constructed it, we would hang on to it as long as we could because it's what we knew. And it would take a real anomaly, a devastating attack on that knowledge production to make us change our perspective. I'll come back to the one in the middle that my teacher, Kantopoulos, talked about. Let me go down to the bottom. Peter Senge was a systems thinker. A lot of people say they're systems thinkers. Systems thinking is extraordinarily complex. It's transcendent. Epistemic strategy makes it hard to understand because essentially you have to bring all the systems together at once. It goes beyond the visual ability or comprehension ability really to see that all in one place at one time of almost any leader I've ever met. So systems thinking is brilliant in its approach to organizational development and leadership, but probably not practically possible. Which brings us really to the one that most people think about, and that's the idea of hierarchy. It's a command and control sequence. I'm at the top of the hierarchy, I give commands. I control, I restructure the hierarchy, and then I get a different result. And the reason why this is so dominant in leadership theory in our society, although everyone tries to say they're flattening the organization, they're flattening it with another hierarchical structure. The reason why it's so dominant is it's functional, it works. It's easy. Not easy to do because it isn't always the most effective strategy or the most robust, but it's easy to understand because we've grown up in it. We had two parents, they were in charge. We went to church, the priest was in charge, or our pastor. We went to school, the teacher was in charge. We've learned this from early in our life. But again, what is the one in the middle of all the epistemic strategies, from the most simple reduction to the most complex transcendence? And that's this notion of heterarchy. It's a notion of networks and network theory. It's emergently complex. So let's just agree. Hierarchy, extremely functional, but no one really wants to work under these conditions. Hierarchy, commonly understood, highly functional. Okay, it's a question of function versus structure as an explanatory starting point. The problem, of course, with hierarchies is they don't handle emergence well. They don't handle change well. They don't handle revolutionary intellectual advancement well. They don't handle technological advancement well. What they do is bog people down in bureaucracy, and they rely on creativity stifling rules or policies that are designed to maintain the status quo, designed to make sure that nothing ever changes. People who love hierarchies are often found in the finance office. They don't like a lot of change in the finance office because they're trying to control money. But we control processes. We control structures. We don't control people. So when we try to do the same thing with people, it doesn't work because it is not robust. It is not dynamic. It's not change-centered. It's not a great epistemic strategy. So let's go back a little. When we're trying to address these things, what do? Well, when we're trying to address reductionists, this is all about changing people's attitudes. So if you ever sat through training, almost think of the solution as a training mechanism. Someone came in and tried to cheer you up. Self-help gurus do this. But attitude won't get you to the ultimate results. We try to think about constructionism, and we talk about things like paradigm shifts, or we need a new vision. Okay? We talk about transcendence, and we think about systems thinking. Let's change the systems. Let's move the systems forward. We see this a lot in the technological revolutions. We're going to buy a new $200,000-$300,000 multi-million-dollar information management system. It's going to change everybody else in the organization. It never happens. You know what happens. You pay another consultant thousands of dollars to come in and put your existing strategies and systems into that new, very expensive system. I've watched it so many times. When it comes to hierarchy, it's always about the structure and about the policies. Oh, we had a bad employee. Let's write a new policy. Let's attack the policy perspective. Where we want to be is in the middle. We want to realize that these are emergently complex organizations that are change focused by their very nature, that are filled with employees who are complex. So Contopoulos said this is a system of levels and relationships defined in terms of pragmatic criteria of scale and complexity, partial inclusion, and semi-autonomy, partial determination from below, partial determination from above, partial focal level determination, and residual local independence. Notions that are admittedly very complex. So now you should say, well, I'm glad you threw out this theoretical model, but how do we operationalize it? How do we make it real? What do we do? So let me kind of present it like this. In the emergent heterarchy, don't think of your organizational chart in terms of a top-down or bottom-up process or a flattened organization. Think of it as emergent. Think of it as dynamic. Think about, let's put the CEO in the middle for a second. And by the way, the CEO doesn't even have to be in the picture in a hierarchy. Maybe the CEO isn't involved at all. Maybe there are subcommittees, which I would rather call teams, specific functions or tasks. Maybe there's a functional manager. Maybe it isn't our normal kind of vice president, assistant vice president, director, staff member, consultant. Maybe it's everybody working together for a common good and a common purpose. But remember, it's constantly changing. Maybe the CEO's in the middle. Maybe the CEO then moves to the top for the next process of the organizational development. Maybe the CEO isn't on the picture. Maybe they're at the bottom. Maybe a staff member leads. Leadership can take on many forms. If you're the leader and you're called CEO, that leadership comes from position, not necessarily from followership. In an emergent heterarchy, it's about followership. And some days they may follow the CEO, and some days employees may follow someone else designated to get them to an end result. I often talk about it as synergy as this, especially when we're doing strategic planning. Realize every employee has a personal mission, a personal reason why they're there. Could be a very small reason. I need a job. I'm here. I'm showing up every day. Not really the most dynamic reason, but it is a reason. Another person's mission may be to change the world. Very different. How do you have independent missions that become interdependent within the organization? How do you get the values of different parts of the organization to be both independent and interdependent with the institutional mission and the personal missions of the people that make up the organization? Because the institutional mission is also interdependent, but it's never independent. The institutional mission is always dependent upon the people and the structures you have built, which I'll call departments here. All the time while this is all going on and you're trying to do this in a vacuum, you have to realize there are internal stakeholders, and it may be difficult to read. At a college, they might be alumni. They could be staff even. They could be the students, the faculty, the administration, trustees. They could also be foundations that give you money. External stakeholders could be government agencies. They could be competitors. Could be people who haven't bought your product yet. In this case, because it's an education example, I'll call them potential students. It could be the families of students. They could be your vendors. They could be unions. It could be the whole community. All external from the organization, pushing on it at all times. At all times, while all these internal people are pushing on these values and missions, and external people are, so are the social forces of society, the media. What they focus on becomes important in people's lives. Laws that are passed, fair and unfair, business and industry, market forces that may go on, government. And I don't mean government in terms of local, but I mean there could be large government. There could be grants that are written that change where an organization is going. There could be a new tax that changes things. These are all forces outside the organization. Society itself, what do they value? Do they value what you're doing? All these things matter. And as these forces are pushing and these visions and missions and values are being brought together, it takes the vision of leadership to move that organization forward. Let's talk a little bit about emergent complexity. The French call this organographical thinking. Thinking of the organization as holistic. What we draw is static. Our hierarchical charts are very one moment focused. They don't represent a living organism. But if we can think as if our organization that we're trying to lead, we're trying to plan for, is an evolving, living creature, almost, constructed by people whose attitudes do matter, whose paradigms might shift, who have systems they're relying on, and who do need to create functional hierarchies to get things done from time to time. But if we think of it at all those in total, we come to the notion of heterarchy in the end. The positions in an organization become much less important. Too many times, positions matter too much. We don't get things done. People talent is what emerges as the essential element. When I fill a position, am I hiring talent or am I hiring functionality? Which one am I doing? The strategic vision and mission and plans become the guiding force rather than the structure that we've hierarchically put in place. This demands constant change, which can be unsettling. But see, the change outside the organization is always going. And when that change outside your organization is moving faster than your organization itself, your organization is on the road to ceasing to exist, to being gone. Heterarchy relies on immense levels of trust and trustworthiness. But the most amazing thing about an emergently complex heterarchy is you need to realize it exists regardless of whether you want it to or whether you try to stop it. I like to think of what Harry Truman sometimes said, because this is what happens. When you get into these organizations and it's emergently complex and the social forces become immense, leaders sometimes can't make a decision. You ever worked for anyone like that? You sat there, you presented all the data, you showed them everything. They had to think about it more. They never got around to making a decision. I've been in meetings with people where they thought about decisions that had no bearing on anything important, and they could never do it. They couldn't decide. They couldn't act. They couldn't move forward. They had to think about it some more. Let's do another study. Write another white paper. If you're faced with that, or you're like that, I would say to you, remember the great words of Harry Truman. Whenever I go out and make a bum decision, I just go out and make another. Most of your decisions probably won't be successful. But I know what is even less successful, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So let's talk about it. Are you an open organization or a closed organization? Do you have an undifferentiated position or a differentiated competitive position? So think about it like this. Is your organization constantly looking at regulations and resources and make decisions based on these alone? Oh, the funding got cut. Oh, there's a new regulation. We have to change everything. You're not going to get anywhere with this. You're completely undifferentiated and closed in your systems approach. Other organizations, and they're called the midpoint, where I think half the organizations are and half are definitely the midpoint. They're towards the closed, undifferentiated competitive position. And if they can get past regulations and resources, then they ask, what do my competitors do? We see this in benchmarking and best practice, constantly benchmarking. We're going to conferences. Ever work for a leader that all they do is go to conferences? They come back with that brilliant new idea that they implement for a week. Then on week 2, they implement the next idea. Nothing ever gets accomplished here. They think they're doing something. They are. They're driving everybody crazy and not succeeding. That's exactly what they're doing. So then, as we begin to open up and we differentiate a competitive position, then we get the tactics of cutting-edge organizations. Cutting-edge organizations. So for those of you who've read Jim Collins' book, you know what I mean? Let's look at the best organizations and let's copy them. I mean, we don't have any of the same people working for us. We don't have the same structures. We don't have the same systems. We may not have the same social forces at the exact same moment. But we're going to sit and think about this constantly. And we're going to say, oh, if this organization could do it, I could. Well, that probably isn't true all the time. I mean, it's certainly better than just doing what the neighbor does, and it's certainly better than being caught up in regulations and resources. But ask yourself, can you replicate that? And if you can't, go to what you need. So sometimes this is called customer needs. Customer needs. People need a lot of things. They don't want them. Okay. Maybe I need to eat less red meat, but I want to. Maybe I need to read more books, but I don't want to. So what we need to know and understand is, what is it that our customer wants? What are their desires? What is it about what they're trying to accomplish that I can match my organization to? In order to do this, I have to be an open and dynamic organization, because that will get me to the unusual ideas, the ideas that will set you apart and set your organization apart. At Warren County Community College, I was lucky enough to brag at one moment that our students were the 11th most successful students in the world. Number one among community colleges in New Jersey. And another organization came out and ranked community colleges in every state and said, you're the number one ranked community college in New Jersey. Then another organization came out and ranked our nursing program number one. This all emerged from unusual ideas implemented. Came from progressively realizing new and worthy goals, moving forward with these ideas, saying, okay, no one else has done this. We'll try it. It makes sense. Maybe you try it on a small scale in a pilot. When it works, ramp that thing up and get it moving. It's great to look at what the best organizations are doing. That is not a bad process. But it is far more exciting to be the organization that researchers come out and research and ideas that others take and want. That is far more interesting. Let's talk about this again in terms of the competitive position being undifferentiated or differentiated, and the value system being standard or distinctive. At the most undifferentiated and standard, what we worry about is what we charge. People won't pay more for what I got. The best thing I can do is give them a coupon. Cost becomes the driving factor. Maybe especially when we're marketing, we say, oh, well, we're cost effective. We're also very convenient. We're in your backyard. Well, what's the backyard? In 2020, during the pandemic, the backyard was anywhere on the internet. It wasn't very convenient for anyone. Not a very differentiated competitive position and not really distinct. Maybe we customize. Maybe our organization has grown above this and we are changing. We're able to look at those customer wants and customize what we're delivering. That's great. That you're moving in the right direction at that point. What's the value added benefit though? Why give people what they want when you can give them more than what they want? You can help them create the desires that they haven't thought of yet. And if we talk about education and students, why are we still trying to sell them degrees we can't even explain to half the people that work in this industry? We should be talking about their learning in a much more dynamic way. What's their experience? How do we tie different disciplines together? How do we tie industry certifications into this? How do we create an experience where the student leaves with so much value out of it? They have all that, but then we actually figured out a way to make it fun. We figured out a way to make it engaging for them. And I know what people will say. I know what the strict constructionalists on these things will say. Oh, you're just lowering standards. I want to do the student experience in the academic disciplines, not in the over expenditure for a water slide trying to get people to come to my college. That's ridiculous. It doesn't have any value. The student experience is what matters most. This notion of, well, that's what I learned, so that's what you need to learn. What kind of thinking is that? Why do I want anyone to know what I know? I want them to know the thought I haven't thought of yet. When we think of the greatest teachers in the world, in history, they were the ones that pushed their students to new ways of thinking. Okay, Socrates had Plato. Plato had Aristotle. What do most educators have at the end of the day? And I know what people will say. People say, oh, I had a great teacher. Changed my life. But let's take the average college student. They spent 16 years in education. All right? If we don't count kindergarten. 17 if we do. 17 teachers. Most of us got to high school and college. We have multiple teachers. Multiple disciplines. Maybe 100 teachers. Let's say the average person in the course of their life had 100 teachers. And they talk about one. So 1%. We should be talking about every educator that way. We should want to be that educator that students talk about, the one that changes lives. I know it's a hard job. I've lived with teachers, been married to a teacher, been a teacher. I know how hard it can be. But I signed up for that. And I signed up to give people a better life and to inspire them. I want to be the teacher that, whatever level it was that I was teaching at, and I've taught from young children all the way to people getting their doctorate and shared dissertations. I want them to remember the experience that they got from me. That's what's going to give you a differentiated competitive position with distinctive values. In education, we often talk about what a student wants and what they'll settle for. We ask them to sacrifice every day. They come with so many desires. Eyes are full to higher education learning, with goals, with passions, and then they settle for what we give them. That's the lowest level. What if we could make them satisfied? What if we could say, the student expects to get this, and we get close. We get close. They perceive they've gotten what they want. That's great. That's satisfaction. Maybe if you're an educational institution, you've done satisfaction surveys like no limits, and you've measured your success against those. Not particularly the most differentiated competitive position, but it's good. But what if a student perceives or gets is far beyond what they expected in the first place? What if they came for a degree and you said you changed their life? Can you build an organization like that? Yeah, I think you can build any organization out of that. We've talked about a lot of intense complexities. You know what happens? As Winston Churchill once said, out of these intense complexities, intense simplicities emerge. There are ripple effects in everything we do. But it's not that hard to create the great organization, as long as you're willing to put in the work. So let's talk about this. If you want to stage the human experience, and I cannot remember where I saw this verse, so I apologize. This is not my original thinking. But I'm always thinking about this in terms of competence. When we work on professional development for people, we talk about competence, or what is it I do? And we think the enemy of this is incompetence. Oh, people don't know what they need to know. Let me bring in a trainer. Let me train them in this. I could remember one, and this will sound funny, but some of us may remember, and again, depending on age and experience, this might be more relevant. But I remember sitting through 3-hour lectures on how to use a telephone. Well, not the rotary phone, not the push button phone, but how to put someone on hold, what to say to them. The leader had decided that we all answered the phone poorly, regardless of where we were in the organizational chart. He was trying to train for incompetence, but that wasn't the real enemy. That wasn't the real problem. The real problem is always apathy. Everyone can answer a phone, but maybe they don't do it with passion. They don't care about the person on the other phone. They become apathetic in the organization. Your role as leader, if you want to increase the competence in your organization, is to attack and try to destroy apathy. Forget incompetence. Everyone can learn. We don't all learn the same things, but everyone can learn. But you have to have the desire. The next thing we kind of work at is courtesy, or what I say. We think about this in terms of rudeness. I'll go back to that same telephone example. There's so many ways you've done this kind of training. It may be training to change people's behaviors so they behave in humane ways. We think of it as rudeness. It's not. It's avoidance. People remain the same, and they do the same bad characteristics because they avoid change. They avoid changing themselves. It's not that they're rude, it's that they don't want to engage. Another example that I like to use is, and I don't do this anymore because, frankly, if you look at the research, it never worked, but it gave people jobs. This idea of people come in and they go into higher education, they take a placement test, and then they spend a year taking classes that never count to their degree. I saw a family in the hallway once, I was standing and observing. The daughter was crying, the mother was crying, everyone was crying. I watched 3 of my employees get as close to the wall as they could, pretend to be I don't know how they could be pretending to look somewhere else, pretend to look somewhere else. I could think about that. It wasn't really rude, it's that they didn't want to engage. They were avoiding the problem. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe they didn't feel they were empowered to solve that person's problem. Maybe they knew how. Maybe I have to go back. Engage those. Find people where they are. Don't avoid them. You'll have a better organization. Then finally, the thing I like to think about is compassion, or what I feel. The enemy is not indifference. It's not that I'm indifferent to your worldview. It's not that I'm indifferent to what you believe. It's that I judge it. We're trained very well in educational institutions to judge other people. It means what we do, we give grades. We make people take a test. We judge them on whether they show up to class or not. It's constantly. We're trained. We're so good at it, but it's not compassionate. When the pandemic of 2020 happened, I was very proud of the people that worked for me, because the mantra left everything that mattered beforehand and entered the value of we care. All of a sudden, what we cared about changed. They didn't care about semicolons to a degree that no human being ever should. Cared about people. Cared about their success. Cared about what they were going through. See, we stopped judging. We started listening. That's a great moment. That's where you want your organization. That's where you want your followers. You want them in competence, so you get rid of their apathy. You want them to be courteous, so you teach them how not to avoid problems. And you want them to be compassionate, humane, so you diminish and teach them how to diminish their judgment of others. Let's also remember that none of these ideas are really new. They're not things I sat in a room and thought about. I remember and I think, if I've seen farther, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And Newton gave us that. I mean, he never said it. I mean, he did. But did he get it from Robert Burton? When Robert said, a dwarf standing on the shoulders of giants sees farther than the giant himself. Or did he get it from Marcus Lucas? Pygmies placed on the shoulders of giants see more than giants themselves. I mean, fortunately, these have all become a little bit more politically correct over time. Somebody said something very similar before Marcus Lucas. Somebody had the idea that you're having right now before you research. Think about it. Realize that everything we build comes from something before. We go further when we don't act like, oh, this was my idea. It's always our idea. Because see, as the leader, I can't have an idea in a vacuum. I can't have a thought without language. Why would I have a language if I don't have someone to speak to? All this matters. So don't take credit. That's a leader is what I'm trying to tell you, because you probably didn't really think of it in the first place. Always give credit. Always give credit. When someone says, I'm really proud of what you accomplished as a leader, you immediately say, no, I'm proud of the people who accomplished it. I was able to watch them, learn from them, and grow myself, but I couldn't have done anything without them. And this wouldn't have happened without them. Remember that. Remember that the best thing we can do in building an organization is progressively realize worthy goals. So let's go back to strategic planning for a minute. You know the traditional phases. If you're in business, maybe you do this in a year or two. If you're in higher ed, you might take 5 or 7 years where the whole world changes around it. I don't know why it takes so long to do something we always do. Vision, mission, value development. First we do that. Then we gather some information. Maybe it's environmental scanning. Maybe your research office does it. get enrollment reports. You might even get like geodemographics. You might even get social media demographics today. Then you do some kind of process. Then you do the information gathering. Many of you will stop there. So they're going to bring you into a room. Might give you some PowerPoint slides. I love the people with PowerPoint slides. They're going to solve the world's problems with PowerPoint slides. Sweat and grit is what solves the world's problems. Caring and compassion is what solves the world's problems. 450 things written on easel pads do not solve the world's problems. Many organizations stop there. They stop at the brainstorming. That's the end of their strategic plan. Better organizations move on in steps. They identify, all right, given all this information, here's 1,000 things we could do. I've seen that plan too. Nobody can do that much. So what I recommend is the fourth step. That's where you develop some kind of criteria. And you say to yourself, okay, I can't do 1,000 things, but here's my criteria that are very important. Let me give you some simple ones. Can I afford it? Do I actually have people who work for me who are capable of this? I do. Okay. It's great to build a rocket ship to go to Venus, but if you don't have a single rocket scientist in your organization, probably not going to do it. So criteria matter. You come up with as many criteria as you can to narrow down those to what you can actually do. Then you propose and you talk about and you beat to death a plan. And then in the end, you ask somebody to write. Now, the other thing that happens too frequently is someone goes, oh, we need a plan. They hire a consultant and they go right to step 6. Maybe they do a little bit of step 2. Maybe they sit down in a little couple focus groups for 3. And then you just get 6. I know what happens then. You know the old song, where, oh, where did my little plan go? Went to the trash. Some people will throw it right in the trash. I've actually seen that happen. Other people I've seen, they put it on a bookshelf. When I see that and it's all covered in dust, I tell the organization, the best thing you can do is you had a 14-page plan last time. Make sure it's a 14-page plan this time. They ask me why. I said, that way, when they take the old one off the shelf, it'll be a perfect fit for the new one because nobody ever reads it. Nobody ever does. I'm not going to go through all these. I'll go through the highlights. But there's an excellent book called Implementing Your Strategic Plan by Fogg. Came out around the turn of the century. He saw 20 key steps, but he broke them down into 5 areas. Number 1, if you want to implement a plan, you got to have an accountability structure. Someone's got to do this thing. Somebody's got to turn the strategy into action. Somebody's got to embed it in the organization, and somebody's got to negotiate, each individual being accountable. I kind of showed you how I do this. I tie personal plans to department plans to the organizational plan. That creates an accountability structure. You have to adjust the institution. This is really important as well. Adjust it. The institution that you're trying to create is not the institution you had yesterday. So you have to change that structure fast. Sometimes you have to change the people fast. You have to foster creative leadership and mental toughness. I think it's one of the problems I see now. People don't want to have conflict. You know, there's something called constructive conflict. It doesn't have to be personalized. It doesn't mean if you don't get your way. Learn to compromise. If you want to be a leader, compromise. But be mentally tough. Be ready to have your ideas critiqued. Remove resistance and fix those processes that don't work. Define your future by teaching yourself, allocate your resources, and align the work. Empower every employee you have. Empower them for execution. Train for execution. Use teams for execution. Communicate as much as you can. That where we go back to that mental toughness idea. Then the 5th thing is evaluate and reward. Evaluate performance. That's part of that accountability structure. Reward results. Celebrate people who succeed. And renew your organization or your college through self-study and constantly continuous improvement. This is what you want to do. But don't reward the bad employees. Reward the good ones. Don't equally reward everyone. And look, you may say, oh, I got unions, I got this, I got that. I can't reward people differently. Oh, yeah, you can. The leader controls one thing that nobody else has, your time. Spend time with your top performers. See, when you spend time trying to fix your lowest performers, Good performers get lonely. And they say, well, if I don't perform well, I'll get a lot more of the leader's time. Don't do that. Make them want your time. Make them want to be around you. Make them want your insights. And then give the most of your time for the best employees. So you want to talk about a learning organization as the end goal? Well, let me talk to you about this. Everyone should be planning for themselves in their own life. And that plan needs to fit your unit, your department, where they work every day. Most people don't work at the institutional level, they work at a process level or a project level. Use those. And then finally, have a good institutional plan, something that people can understand. Think about what General George S. Patton once said. Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do and let them surprise you with their own ingenuity. This is how you will get what you need out of people. When you tell people and go in and micromanage them, tell them how to do every little task and criticize them, you create dependent individuals who can do nothing. Just tell them what you want accomplished. Tell them what their budget is, and tell them if they don't, that'll be a negative on the accountability. Let them surprise you. So discipline your thoughts. Think about your organization when you're developing change or you're developing your plan. Why are you developing plans about things no one who works for you is even passionate about or cares about? Why do you do this? Sometimes as leaders, we take over and we're passionate about something no one else is. You have two options here. Change your passions or change your people. But when I watch people think they're going to inspire someone, most of us are not inspirational. Most of us are not Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi. Most of us do not have those kinds of abilities. Most of us will not share with people our words and have them remembered 2,000 years later. So stop thinking you are. Start aligning the passions of your organization. Think about what could we be best at. One of the things I loved most was when Jack Welch said, GE will either be number 1, number 2, and number 3 in anything we do, or we're getting out of that business. Think like that when you're developing your organization. When people are saying that they want a major investment of money, or they want to move forward with you, is it something we can be best at? Do we have the capacity here to do that? I'm amazed at how many people just add, and nothing is ever good. Why? And then think about what drives your engine, your economic engine, if you will. It's the time, it's talent, it's revenue, it's the treasure of your organization, it's your people, it's how much time you have to do things. What can this mean for the bottom line? And realize nothing is impossible. The impossible for a great leader with a well thought out plan is just something that takes a little bit longer. Or as Hannibal once said, we will either find a way or we'll make one. Jim Collins again talked about the amazement of flywheel, of moving forward, of realizing that our success will have no single defining moment, no single defining action, no grand program, no one killer innovation. There's no such thing as luck. Luck is what happens when opportunity and prepared people come together. There's going to be no lucky break, and there's no miracle moment. Oh, maybe somebody else will solve our problems. Think about it as the power of the flywheel. If you can build minor successes or create minor successes that build support and commitment, that will breed even more success and commitment. And like the flywheel, it'll go round and round. And as we have proven, people like to support winners. See, don't start with a grandest plan. Start with something you can accomplish. Start with followers that are willing to follow you, and start with something that will bring you success. Then build it incrementally, slowly. Do it that way. Ask yourself what comes next. See, you can't get to the great without starting at the good. And most of us probably aren't even starting at the good. See, the great book would have been From Terrible to Great. That's what most of us probably have found ourselves as leadership when we've taken something over. Or maybe even in our own life. Think about it, building upon what you already have done. Adding, but in incremental steps. I'm always amazed when someone comes in, it's their first chance at leadership, and they decide they're going to take on the biggest challenge. You don't have the capacity. You don't have people where they need to be. You don't have understanding where it needs to be. And remember, you need committed people to do these things. Without commitment, it can't happen. And your plan is not a document. It is not a list of goals. It is a means of bringing together people in that commitment around the shining light of a better tomorrow. That's what planning should be about. That should be the purpose. See, what strategic planning is driving. Driving without fog. That's all the planner is doing. That's all the leader is doing, is removing the fog that stands in our way so we can move forward. So when you begin as a leader, ask only one question, or you begin a plan. Am I on this planet to do something? Or am I here for just something to do? Am I passing time? If you're here to do something, what is that something? What is your leadership legacy? And then remember the one internal danger for any organization, especially as it begins to get successful. It's complacency. It's this idea of, oh, I'm successful, so I can stop now. I've reached success. There's nowhere for me to go. Brian McClenny, a community college president, well-known leader, said, organizations are either developing or deteriorating. There is no status quo. There's no status quo for you at any given moment. So I'll leave you with one last thought from Henry David Thoreau. If one advances confidently in the direction of your dreams and endeavors to live the life which you have imagined, you will meet with success, unexpected in common hours. Most of our hours are common. Be uncommon. Be exceptional. I'm Dr. Will Austin. My book is called Strategic Planning for Smart Leadership. It's available at Amazon.com. These are my thoughts about leadership and planning. I wish you well, and I look forward to someday hearing your thoughts. Take care.